Hello everyone to USML East Layer. Today we'll start the dermatology module and we will be talking about the skin. As you might know, skin contain three layers mainly: epidermis, dermis, and the hypodermis, or it can be called the subcutaneous fat. And the reason why we're going to be studying epidermis really the reason why we'll be studying epidermis is because dermatopathology really focus on epidermis. As a reason for that, epidermis has 5 layers, and each layer can be increased or thickened or thinned depending on the disease itself. So it is very expected in your USMLE exam, and it's very high yield as well, that there be a question in regards, for example, to cirrhosis and ask you which layer of the epidermis is thickened and which layer is thinned. We will be talking about that in the cirrhosis module, but we will also talk about it a little bit here. So as I already said, epidermis kind of have a 5-layer before we get to the dermis. And these are 2 pictures, and we will talk about each of them, right? But a really quick acronym is come, let's get sunburnt. And let's keep this as the headlight of our class or our module for today. So come, let's get sunburnt. So the C is for corneum. So that is the first and most superficial layer. Then we have lucidium, we have granulosum, we have spinosum, and we have bacilla. Let's start one by one. So we have a stratum corneum and a stratum lucidium. These both are dead cells. So let's get this out of the way. So these both are dead cells, and this is, as you can see, there are no nuclei. So these are anuclei dead cells. And the reason why this is because you don't really need active cells near the outer or the superficial part of your skin. But in regards, you would like to be a protective layer for what is important here. Okay? And that is basically what the corneum is. As you can see, they are flattened, protective layer, dead cells, and no nuclei. All you need to know, again, protective layer, dead cells, no nuclei, and flat. These are all the things that you need to know. For lucidium, I got this picture simply because it's very interesting, because it shows 2 things that I really want to talk about. First of all, it's a clear layer, as you can tell from the drawing. And second of all, it's very thin. So you might not really identify this in most of the skins unless it is thickened. Okay? So that is something that to keep in mind. Next step, we go to the granulosum. And as you can see, right now we're starting to get into the important stuff, so let's focus. These are dead cells, and these are important cells, let's call them, okay? So what is this? What this is going to act like? This is acting like a barrier, correct? So granulosum. What does it remind you? This reminds you that it contains granules. And what do these granules do? They are creating keratin filaments. So keratin filaments. And these keratin filaments are forming barrier to prevent anything to enter into the most important cells. So like what? Like water, microbes, any type of bacteria, etc. So this is kind of a protective one, and this is the barrier. So let's keep going. We have the one before the last, which is spinosum. And spinosum, I really want you to focus down here. If you can see the projection like of the spinosum. All right. And that is basically just a kind of a high yield that they're taking a projection like, and that is about it. We talk more about this in the dermatopathology, where a couple of diseases have a thickened or thinned spinosum, okay? And lastly, we have the bacilla. The bacilla is kind of the stem layer, which everything above it originates from. So what do we call that? We call that a highly mitotic index number. So basically it regenerates a lot and it creates everything else here. Something very high yield for you to know. So before we get to that, we have all of this written here. We have the corneum, we have the pseudium, we have the granulosum, spinosum, and the basillae. As you already said, and get this through your head. Come, let's get sunburnt. Corneum is basically protective, dead, no nucleus, and flattened. Lucidium, clear, not identified in thin skin. Granulosum have granules, keratin filaments. Spinosum, spiny projections. It has some bridges, not really high yield, it's fine. And we have basillae, which is stem cell layer, highly mitotic. And this is another something that is high yield to mention, and this is the one that I wanted to mention before. So there is something called desmosomes and hemidesmosomes. And I know this might be confusing, so let's get back to the pictures. So hemidesmosomes basically attach the basal layer here with the cells above it or below it, it's fine. But like here's the hemidesmosomes doing its job, attaching the cells to the basal layer. All right, and we have desmosomes. So desmosomes attach the cells to its adjacent cells, if it makes sense. That the cells, so this cell is attached to this cells by desmosomes. So it's attaching cells to nearby or adjacent other cells. And this only happens in the spinosum and basal places. You might wonder why, because the granulosum is basically keratin filaments and the rest are dead cells, okay? Okay. So let's, as I already told you, so we're gonna get started with the dermatopathology. So for dermatopathology, as I already told you, it focuses pretty much in the epidermal thickening or thinning, and that is kind of the theme of our today's lecture. We have hyperkeratosis, and hyperkeratosis will be starting from the first epidermal layer, and hyperkeratosis is the thickening of the very superficial epidermal layer, which is corneum, stratum corneum. And why is that? That is basically due to excess keratin, which is steroses. What I want you to notice in this picture, for example, this is very hypertrophied, as you can see. There is a lot of hypertrophy, a lot of kind of non-differentiated cells. Here, maybe it may be like more obvious. As you can see, these are dead cells, anucleated. There is no nuclei here, no nuclei, and it's a lot of hypertrophy. So as I already told you, no nuclei, that means that is a corneum, all right? So you're gonna ask me about, okay, but these are kind of nucleotide cells right next to them. So what is the difference? And you'll be correct. These are kind of totally two different dermatopathologies. This is as hyperkeratosis, but the other one is called barokeratosis. And barokeratosis is basically hyperkeratosis in addition to retained nuclei, which also can be seen here. So this is a thickened corneum in addition to keeping the nuclei of the cells. This can be found in this picture or in this picture right here. Okay? So where is barokeratosis is found? This is found in cirrhosis, malignancy, actinic keratosis as well. So we finished let's remember, let's get sunburnt. So we finished the corneum. We already said it has two, hyperkeratosis and barokeratosis. The lucid one, really, as I already told you, in thin skin, it doesn't really exist much. It's only found in thick skin, so let's just don't worry about it much. So let's get, right now we're on the G, which is granulosum. And in granulosum, we have hypergranulolysis, and that's it right here, hypergranulolysis. Hypergranulolysis is basically in the sternum granulosum, and this is very high yield that is seen in lesion blindness. You might wonder what is lesion blindness is, and that is absolutely fine. We have a whole module talking about skin disorders, and we'll discuss it more. But the most important thing to think about it is this is found in hepatitis C virus, and it's very itchy. And here's a picture of it, by the way. It is also found in affecting the chins and areas like that. We will talk about it. Okay, so finally we got to the spinosum layer. As you already said, let's get sun burnt, and we're right now in the sun. And for the spinosum layer, we actually have two pathologies. The first one is called the spongiosis, and the other one is called acanthosis. Spongiosis is basically an accumulation of edematous fluid in intracellular spaces and is seen in eczema. Again, spongiosis is accumulation of edematous fluid in intracellular spaces and is only seen mostly in eczema. Okay, and this can be found here, as you see, right here. There's a lot of fluid in the cells or intracellularly, especially right here as well. That is spongiosis. Don't worry, you don't really need to memorize all of these pictures. That is fine. Mostly you need to remember the information about them, which you can answer the question later. Acantholysis is determinately the separation of epidermal cells and is seen in Bifidus vulgaris. We will talk about this disease later as well, don't worry. This is kind of an out-of-place information that we will talk about later. But this is a separation of epidermal cells. Lastly, we have acanthosis. And acanthosis, as I already told you, it is epidermal hyperplasia with thickened sternum spinosum and elongated rete ridges. As also you can find here, you can Google elongated rete ridges, but you can find it right here if you can. So these are called rete ridges, all right? And these are elongated in acanthosis. But please look pictures, like open pictures from it and from Google, and you're gonna find a lot of pictures explaining the elongated rete ridges. And as I already told you, so basically, spinosum have two diseases. The first one is spongiosis, and the second one is acanthosis. Something really important in regards to acanthosis is acanthosis nigricans, and this is associated with insulin resistance, obesity, malignancy. And this is kind of a picture of it because it mostly occurs in the axilla or neck or any kind of skin folds actually, okay? Also, it's very important in insulin resistance. Yes, correct. So you might have a diabetes case coming to you with kind of discoloration in the axilla. This would be acanthosis nigricans. So that was mostly all the dermatopathologies that we need. And right now we're gonna talk very shortly about two major things. The primary skin lesions and the secondary skin lesions. You might wonder, or you might ask yourself, okay, what is the difference between primary skin lesions and secondary? Basically, secondary is a primary gone wrong. If you can understand that, you would make everything easier. But basically, primary is really not. Of course, it's associated with many pathologies, but secondary is more pathological, and it is kind of an affected or primary skin lesion that is gotten wrong, okay? There are many, and I know that this might look very overwhelming, but let's take it one step at a time, okay? Let's start here. I want you to think about it like this. So we have primary, hold on. We have primary skin lesions. And let's think about it from two ways. We have that is flat, and we have that is absolutely raised, okay? And from here, we're gonna keep going. So flat. The number that is determined is 1 centimeter. So we have less than 1 centimeter, which will be macule, and we have more than 1 centimeter, which will be a patch. As you can see here, a macule is less than 1 centimeter, and a patch is more than 1 centimeter. So these are both flat regions, as you can see right here. One is just more than 1 centimeter and the other is less than 1 centimeter. For the raised one, we are also gonna follow the 1 centimeter rule. So we have less than 1 centimeter, and the less one than and less ones, oh my gosh, less than 1 centimeter is called a papule. All right, and that is it. And this is raised, as you can see right here. And the one that is more than 1 centimeter is called a blade. So these pictures are really important for you to remember, and these are kind of the very hard one to remember. So we have a third one, which is fluid filled, which is, you can say that it's part of the raised one, because the raised one are two types. There is a type that is not fluid filled, and there is a type that is fluid filled. So raised, we have the babule and Blake. In addition to the filled raised one, we have less than 1 centimeter, which is vesicles, and more than 1 centimeter, which is bulla. So I hope that this is so let's come back to this table. We have macula versus patches. These both are flat lesions. Macula is just less than 1 centimeter and patches more than 1 centimeter. We have papilla and Blake. Both are raised less than more. Vesicle and bulla, these are both filled, fluid filled lesions. The vesicle is less than 1 centimeter, the bulla is more. And pustule. So what is a pustule? Pustule is basically the filled fluid going to pus. So going purulent. Please don't call it pussy. Purulent. One example is an acne. And lastly, we have wheals. So wheals are raised lesions or especially elevated papilla. And what I want you to remember from wheals is that it's itchy and it's erythematous. Basically, it's papilla, red papilla with red around it and itchy. Okay? And these are the primary skin lesions. Going to the secondary skin lesions, which are basically primary gone wrong. We have scale, which are very famous for cirrhosis. We will be talking more about that in the cirrhosis module. We have crust, dried, exudate. You can think about it when pus is kind of dried, so this crust. And we have the last three ones, which we'll be explaining here. So we have a fissure. A fissure is a narrow tear in the skin, as you can see. Think about anal fissure, for example. Erosion. Erosion is a wide lesion, wider than a fissure, as you can tell. This is very narrow and this is very wide. But the erosion is not as deep as an ulcer. And that is the difference between erosions and ulcers. Erosions are only involves the epidermis. Meanwhile, ulcers involve the full epidermis and parts of the dermis. All right? So this has been our module on the skin lesion. Please make sure to follow the assembly layer, and thank you so much for watching.